Hi, everybody. I'm Candid Frank of NLL Lacrosse Talk. Welcome to the Spanglish Sports World Network on Zingo TV channel 250. Please remember to download the Zingo TV app at the respective app stores for iOS and Android devices. While you download, make sure you rate and leave a comment. Both apps are absolutely free. Zingo TV is available on Google, Chromecast, Amazon Fire, Fire TV sticks, Roku sticks, and also on all smart TVs 2016 forward. Now on NL Lacrosse Talk, our co-host Gary Groob and our very special guest, Michelle Bowyer, women's chairperson for World Lacrosse, and a few other things, like she was part of the Port Coquitlam girls lacrosse team in the 70s. She captained 11 consecutive BC Selects Women's Field Lacrosse Championship teams, captained Team Canada Field Lacrosse to bronze at the World Championships in England in 1982, finished fourth in 86 and 89 at the Field World Championships in Philadelphia and Perth, Australia, respectively, placed fifth in 1997's World Cup in Japan. In 2009, was recognized as the International Federation of Women's Lacrosse for outstanding participation and achievement in World Cup competition as a player, assistant coach, and head coach for Team Canada Women's Lacrosse. The class of 2020 Canadian Lacrosse Hall of Fame. And Gary, apparently it doesn't end there.
No. Michelle is also part of the working group for the World Lacrosse. The chair of the working group, one of the most accomplished players. Welcome to the show, Michelle.
What a resume. Yeah, excited to be here with you guys.
And thanks for coming. We really appreciate you being here.
It's a pleasure, really.
Well, whenever we have lacrosse royalty on, we ask them, and even the ones who are the minions and or the grunts, as Gary would put it, we always ask them what drew them into the game. What drew you in?
Oh, it was a love affair right from the start. I remember years and years ago, before I actually played in a formal league or anything, one of my brother's friends just left a box lacrosse stick, the old wooden stick, at the house, and I picked it up and I started playing around with it. It just kind of felt like it was meant to be in my hands. And a little while later, a friend of mine said, "Hey, they're starting this team in Port Coquitlam. It's the first women's team. Why don't you come out and play?" And as soon as I threw on the pads and the helmet and got out there on the floor, it was literally just, I fell in love with it, every aspect of it, and I've never really stepped away from the game since.
It sounds to me like maybe you might even have been a little attached to the physical contact, the aggressiveness, maybe a little.
That was a big appeal, actually. I had never played any sport like that. I played a little bit of softball. There weren't many sports for girls really back then, and certainly nothing along the lines of lacrosse or hockey until I got involved. And I actually really enjoyed it. Of course, you couldn't get any women's specific equipment back then, so I think I probably stole some of my brother's hockey gear, and I literally kind of pieced it all together. And that, for me, just going out and hitting and being hit, it was part of the draw of the game.
It's a very physical game, and as you said back when you started, and we're not just talking about lacrosse, we're talking about sports in general. It didn't accommodate girls. The best you could do at first was have girls' teams, but if you didn't have a girls' team, you didn't get to play.
No, and I didn't even play many sports like in high school. For girls, there was track, and I don't know, I can't even remember. I think I did a bit of track, but I kind of short in one end, so I wasn't very good at it. But then, after lacrosse, I got into ice hockey, which again, it was like the first women's team in our hometown, and it just kind of went from there. So I was just happy to be able to play a sport that my brothers both played. And I always thought I got kind of ripped off. They got to play baseball, wear those cool uniforms, and play these contact sports. And when I was finally able to do that, I was really happy about it.
Now, you started off in box, right? Not field. which is
Oh yeah.
people start in field, but you were able to start in box and then eventually get into field. So let's talk about that a little bit. And
Yeah,
your first.
I actually was lucky. Like a lot of the gals that are on the working group with me never experienced playing on just a straight girls team. A lot of girls that I know now even are playing. They played on mixed teams. We had an all women's league, and yeah, and then I played from '72 right through till about the late '70s, early '80s, and then Canada got invited to a world championship in England. So it was the first official one. And I mean, it was just a crazy experience because none of us ever played field lacrosse. And here we were going off to a world championship.
Now you started off with the Kirby's Clipettes. Is that, did I get that right?
Yeah. Yeah, it was the guy who was our sponsor, and bless his heart, Frank Kirby passed away a few years ago, but him and his wife had a hairstyling business, and they became our primary sponsor. And he was probably the most generous guy on the planet, and we became known as the Clipettes because there was a men's team called the Clippers, and we were the Clipettes. So, yeah, and he wanted us all in black uniforms, and I think that we just scared people just because we always came in all black and everything, and we were actually pretty good. And so it was, yeah, it was just an amazing group of gals that ended up not only playing for the box team, but a lot of us went on to play for Canada and field as well.
Now there's a story I want to get into about, as you were practicing, honing your skills and going into the box there and just, practicing. Tell us about your original stuff, just practicing shots and things like that in the box out there.
Well, I was always felt like I needed to mentally rehearse. It was such a physically aggressive game, and I used to like sort of walk through all my moves in the lacrosse box beforehand and practice shots, till the cows came home. And I would spend hours, literally hours. I had this little circuit. I would run from our house and down into town and get to the box and practice. And the one time I was there, and this guy used to come out on his balcony above in this apartment next to the lacrosse box, and he would watch me. And one time he caught my eye, and I literally was just like bang, bang, bang. He says, "Do you have to do that?" And so I started talking to him, and I said, "Well, yeah, actually, I do, because we were getting ready, I think, for a big championship." And I said, I got to practice to be the best I can be." And he said, "Well, what are you practicing for?" So I told him, it was a national championship, and and I said there's going to be an MVP in the tournament. I said I want to shoot for that. So next time I came to the lacrosse box, this guy, I guess it's an outdoor box, and balls always go out of the box, and they'd be in the toolies. He'd go find them, and I come into the box one day, and all of a sudden he's up on the balconies throwing these lacrosse balls. I guess he figured, he'd help me out and give me a few extra balls to practice with. But anyway, we became fast friends after that.
Now I talked about the box team getting into field lacrosse, and it was to segue into this. You guys took a trip out to Stanford. Now here's a bunch of box lacrosse girls playing, and you go to this field school and basically stun them.
Well, I mean, some of those trips we did just in general were some of the crazy experiences we ever had. But I do remember the Stanford trip because they asked us first off if we'd bring our box equipment down. So we thought, oh, okay. They wanted us to do a little demo. So that was sort of the side story. But we got down there, and all they had was like these PE issue sticks that had been jammed in a big bin somewhere in the gym. And so these are the sticks they gave us. So, I mean, you can imagine a bunch of box players with these big, loopy, pockets. And it was like trying to stick handle on a tennis racket. And anyway, I mean, we just had the skills, but we just had to find a way to transfer it into the, using the tennis racket. But yeah, we did okay. I think we won a lot of tournaments that we went off to down in the States. And but then we did the demo. So we went into the gym and we put all the equipment on. Well, I mean, we thought, well, let's give them the full on experience. So we're like slamming each other everywhere, and these little preppy girls were all going, "Oh my god!" They were a little taken aback by the aggressive play, but they didn't mess with us on the field. I'll tell you that.
Just not.
I guess that was a message that you sent before the game, inadvertently or inadvertently.
It was not our strategy, but apparently it was quite effective.
The
Now,
physical nature. Go.
Sorry,
Okay, go ahead.
go ahead.
That's okay.
So you took a lot of trips. How did you get funding for all this?
Oh, good question, Gary. I often look back at those experiences and I think none of us had a nickel, in our pocket. We fundraised literally. I swear I've sold more T-shirts and raffle tickets, and we've done more car washes than anybody on the planet. But yeah, off we would go on these junkets, and we started out by going to the Western States tournament, which could be at Stanford or UC Davis or UC Center, wherever. The one time we actually chartered a bus down, and that was just one of the craziest trips. And then we started going off to the East Coast because our coach, Dave Evans, Hall of Famer, he figured the best way to get good was to play the best. So yeah, we would go off to these. The one we went to more frequently was the William and Mary tournament, which is still a huge tournament down in Virginia, and you get to play the cream of the crop.
How important was it to have that Canadian attitude? Because what we hear all the time and what we watch is Canadian kids are almost bred to be tougher when it comes to lacrosse. They play more of a physical game. Do you attribute that to girls like you that knew boys and followed the boys game and took your lead from them, or was it something self-motivating?
I think it could have been a little bit of both. There weren't girls teams to watch per se. When I first started playing box, and we didn't really know much about field when we first started going. So yeah, a lot of our sort of heroes in the game were, like the Kevin Alexanders with Victoria and the Mike Reillys from the Adanacs, guys like that. But it's almost uncanny, like the group of women that ended up together. And I said, like earlier, we played box, and then a lot of us went on and played for Canada and field. There was just some kind of weird chemistry between all of us. But I think the driving force for sure was our coach. Like Dave, he literally, he ran us into the ground in practices, and he instilled this kind of work ethic in us that stuck with us through years of our playing careers. And even to this day, a lot of those same gals, I'm in touch with them because we're kind of like family. A lot of them are still playing sports and super active. So I think part of it was innate, and part of it was it just kind of trained into us.
Looking now and looking back at that kind of attitude, it was kind of ironic at that time because girls didn't play. I think you talked a little bit about before. Girls didn't play physical sports like that. So it was kind of a real, it was a stark difference on what girls could expect to see. How did the girls who watched you guys play, how were they affected by the way you played? I know you talked about the opposition, but how about girls that just maybe were curious about the game?
I actually just had met up with a friend from high school just recently, and we were just talking a little bit about some of the things that have been happening since I retired from lacrosse, and some of the cool interviews like this that have been happening. And she looks at me and she says, I used to love going out and watch you play lacrosse. And I never knew that. I was vaguely aware that there were people in the stands, and my parents even came once in a while. But yeah, I don't know that we had enough notoriety back in the day for anybody to really even be paying attention. But I guess some people were. I know one of the players I played on the Clipettes with, I know her dad came up to me one time after a game, and he slaps me on the back and he says to me, "You play just like a boy." And I thought, okay, thank you very much, I guess.
Probably the greatest compliment he could have given you, really, at the time.
I guess.
In the game, yeah.
I guess my point was that because girls weren't playing sports that much, because it was such an aggressive game. Was there a reticence for some women, maybe even who showed up to play on the team, that needed to hone their confidence? Because to play physical, you have to be confident. You have to believe you can handle it. What kind of challenge was that for either the girls when you got together, or new girls that were integrated in?
Well, I do think that, like I said, it was just kind of a unique group. As it turned out, a lot of the gals I was playing with had already been playing in the women's league, and a lot of them played ice hockey long before. I came from a smaller town, and we didn't have, some of those sports available to us, but other athletes did. But it didn't seem like the contact bothered anybody. If anything, I think people thrived on it. But having a male coaches, he actually toughened us up. I mean, our practices, we killed each other because we were so aggressive, and yeah, it didn't seem as though anybody ever shied away from the contact. And I know, working for World Lacrosse, with the working group, we sent a survey out at the start of our project to lacrosse athletes all over the world, and that was one of the questions we asked them: Would you want to play box lacrosse if there was less contact? And we got a resounding no. We want to play full contact.
That's the question I was asking.
Yeah.
That's exactly the question. So what you're telling me is, if I'm getting this right, is girls are no different than boys when it comes to sports.
Yeah, no, it's we, like I said, that question. I think the answer to just would you want to play box or try to play the sport if you've never played? Would you want full contact or not? It was like 78% said yes, box across, and yes, full contact. And in the anecdotal kind of or the qualitative feedback, resounding, make it like the guys' game. We want the same rules, the same hitting, same contact, same everything.
Yeah, because they don't do that in hockey even today, because the girls play non-contact in hockey. That's why
they don't have it field lacrosse either, which is ridiculous. I think it'd be more like a male game too, honestly.
Yeah, no, it's I wonder too if over time with the advent of the sixes, that is going to be the Olympic brand of lacrosse, if you might see a little more physical play on the women's side, because quite frankly, the rules are very similar. They wanted to make it that way. So in terms of viewership, there wouldn't be, a dramatic difference between the men's side and the women's side at Olympic level. So who knows what will happen over time.
Glad you said that. It's something I believe. I truly believe this, and I hope I don't get too many credit. And I'm saying this is nothing to do with Gary and nothing to do with the show. My personal opinion is women's hockey would be a lot more interesting if there was contact, and I think they can handle it. But that's just an opinion on my part. I'm not asking for women's hockey to insert violence or anything, but the physical aspect of every sport is very attractive, not only for the people who watch, which we know it is, but also for those that play. And I'm talking to somebody who understands that and is probably the poster girl for something like that.
Yeah, and yet there's real purists out there that love the women's game. And when I first started playing field, there were the Brits mainly. They played this very ladylike style of play with big loopy passes, and of course we come as box players, and we're used to being in tight quarters. And the one British player, we beat England, the host country, in our first game against them, and one of the players came up to me afterward, and she said, "You all pass the ball to each other harder than we shoot on net." And that's just the style of play. So our biggest challenge when we first started playing field was not cross-checking somebody, because what are you used to? He's like, dang, you used to hitting people. We may have had a few miscues every once in a while.
Now let's talk about Dave Evans. You brought him up, Hall of Famer, of course. How did he get convinced to become the coach?
We tricked him. We totally tricked him.
How else do you do it?
Well, he was injured when he first came on board. I think he tore his hamstring. I think we were actually at the game where he tore his hamstring, and I don't think he ever really bounced back from that injury playing for the Berards back in the day. And another guy that was coaching us prior to him coming on, I think he got him to come out, and I don't know. He just kind of stuck with us, and I think we kind of grew on him. And he said to me one time, he said, I'm not going to treat you girls like girls. He said, I'm going to treat you just like the athletes you are, and don't expect any special treatment from me. And we were all fine with that. We thrived on the way he treated us.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, there was some games where you guys weren't playing so great, and he wasn't afraid to take you out and mention it to you, so to speak.
Yeah, there may have been a few F-bombs in our history with Dave. I remember one practice. I mean, he took everything so seriously. And one practice, we were just horsing around, and the clipboard went in the tree, and that was it. We were running lines for the next half an hour, and he said, as long as you're smiling, you're keeping running. So yeah, he was tough with us, and that was fine with us. That's what
Now
made
you
us.
ended up with a couple of problems though, because some of these tournaments that you went to wouldn't allow a male coach.
When we first started playing internationally in field, having male coaches, I don't know if it was like completely, outlawed or whatever, but it was frowned upon.
Mm-hmm.
But I do recall a time, and this is maybe why it was frowned upon. We were playing in that William and Mary tournament in Virginia, and we had just been at a camp down in Florida and worked our way up to Virginia. And we started out in this tournament, and we just were horrible, just pathetic. We couldn't catch a ball to save our lives. And at halftime, Dave walks us over to the side of the field, and he just tore into us. And to this day, it's legendary. Like, he just had a complete meltdown on us. But of course, the air was blue around him, and all these preppy girls were walking by going, oh my, and we sure played well after that.
Now the 82 team, how was that team put together? Obviously it was from all over the place, but what was the makeup of this team?
Well, it was primarily, I mean, there wasn't field. I know the Eastern girls played in Ontario, played a little bit of field pre-82, but we had never played. And certainly across Canada, there really wasn't anybody that anybody knew anything about to have them come to the training camp. So it's pretty much East, Ontario, BC. And but we were pretty much all just box players. So and we had played, a lot of us had played against each other in national box championships, and we kind of didn't like each other all that much. And suddenly we were all like in training camps together, and it was a little intense.
Right.
A little intense to say the least, but we were all super competitive athletes, and we kind of got used to each other. And obviously the rest is history. Off we went to England and pulled the big upset, came in third.
How did it manifest itself when some of the difficulties that now you can look at back at and kind of, I don't know, shrug your shoulders, laugh, wonder how it got that carried away? How some of the examples of how difficult it was to put aside where you came from to now who you are, which is representing Canada.
Well, first off, so they brought in an American coach, which was good because she was kind of neutral. But I think the Eastern players thought the coach was a little more aligned with our crew from BC, and it never felt that way, but they felt like there might be or something. But ultimately, she was an All-American burger, and only going to pick the best athletes. So regardless, and I mean, we understood that, but I tell you what, there were battles when it came to training camps, animosity, but I think we had 3 or 4 camps, and so when the dust settled, we were all just there to win, and so we just went with that attitude. We're just all for one for all, away we went.
Now, about those 11 national titles in a row, let's talk about that, because there were some that were just absolute battles that you had. I think Ontario was always a strong one. Quebec was strong. Let's talk about that over the years. And it was more or less chemistry of your team that got you through a lot of this.
Yeah, those were every championship was usually us against Ontario in the end of it. And of course, a lot of us had played national team together, and then suddenly we're pitted against each other on the field. But and there were some classic championship finals. I think the one went into double or triple overtime in Oshawa, and it was about 4,000 degrees playing field lacrosse in Oshawa in August, I think it was. And yeah, so and for a while, Quebec, they held their own as well. I don't know how strong the program is now, but they produced some really good teams. And even in Alberta, they started coming on strong, sort of midway through all those years that we won. But yeah, somehow we always managed to come out on top. But I always said, and I mean, I got interviewed one time, and I said, as long as other teams are prepared to train as hard as us, they're sooner or later they're going to knock us off. But I mean, we just trained. We trained like animals. We just trained nonstop, and we were rewarded for it by winning championships.
Right. Now, you've had a benefit of playing in some great arenas, especially out in your area there. There's some just absolute amazing arenas. One of my favorite to come to mind, of course, is Queen's Park Arena. Are there any of these arenas that stand out in your mind?
Well, Queen's Park was always interesting, because there were always hollow spots in the boards, and the floor was, a little creaky. But I kind of like playing on the wooden floor because the balls bounce a little bit differently. Yeah, I can't really think. I guess White Rock had a really nice arena. It was a little bit bigger and a little bit different than our arena that felt a little bit prison-like. I don't know what it was about Burnaby Lake, but the White Rock arena was really nice. But yeah, overall, I mean, it didn't really matter to me, wherever we played, it was all fun.
Right. Because you guys even did a lot of box outdoors too, just trying to get floor time, so to speak, right?
Yeah, and that was pretty common for women's teams. Often you just kind of get relegated to the outdoor boxes. We practiced that one in Burnaby. Dave really liked training us at this one because at the end of practices in all of our equipment, he let us take our helmets off. There was a ravine behind the lacrosse box that went this sort of switchbacky trail down to the creek. And he used to make us run after practice in all of our equipment, all the way down to the bottom, sprint to the top. And he would just stand with his stick in his hand. And if he didn't think we were working hard enough, he'd just point, as in, go again. And off we go.
I bet you a lot of you wanted to go in that ravine after a while.
Yeah. We actually had a girl that tried out for our team one time, and it was the ravine that did it for her. She finished her ravine running and never came back again. So you had to get used to stuff like that with Dave, or you weren't going to survive.
Wow. Now, you continued afterwards and you stayed in the game coaching. How did you get involved with coaching?
To be honest, Gary, I think I'd still be playing now if I could have, but I actually sustained an injury, quite a serious injury, playing ball hockey of all things. So I fractured a vertebrae in my neck, and my doctor said to me afterwards, he said, yeah, you were probably about that close to not making it. And so I spent about a year doing cervical traction and a whole bunch of stuff to get my neck back to normal. And I had, at that point, I by the time I was assessed, I had numbness in my arms and my fingertips. And anyway, my doctor decided it was a good time to give up the playing career and consider coaching. So, not my choice at that time, but that's how it evolved, and I ended up coaching for Canada and coaching the field lacrosse team in BC.
Mm-hmm. Now, would you say a lot of those teams would be a springboard of how women's lacrosse really grew here in Canada?
Yes. Yeah, I wish it would have been a bit more of a springboard for teams on this side of the country, but yeah, a lot of the players from Ontario, after their playing careers, a lot of them, well, actually during their playing careers, we started to have girls go down to the States on scholarships.
Mm-hmm.
And that came after the 82 World Cup. And it's just been a steady stream ever since. And a lot of those players have come back to Canada and brought all that skill and expertise. And especially in Ontario, they were able to get it into the school system. That was the biggest springboard right there.
Mm-hmm.
We've struggled with that out here. I don't know about other provinces, Gary, but that was the biggest thing for Ontario. Once it got into the schools, into the colleges, universities, and then they've probably sent 3 times as many players off on scholarships as we've been able to out here.
The good news is that it's not a very expensive sport to play.
No, compared to boxing. Although that said, I mean, I've been looking at the price of the average field stick these days, and it's like, holy smokes, like a couple $100 for, the sticks are so different than what they used to be. And but yeah, they're
still
pricey.
Cheaper than hockey, because how many sticks do players go through with hockey sticks, and each one costs about the same?
That's very true. I think lacrosse sticks are a little hardier than hockey sticks these days.
Speaking of hardier, you talked about metal and wooden sticks. Which did you prefer?
There's something about, like I told this, they made us pre-tape our acceptance or little speech for the Hall of Fame induction. And I told the story about picking out my very first box stick. And my dad took me to the local sports store, and I swear I must have gone through every stick in the store until I found the one that just felt, like if you ever had a box stick, it's got to just feel the right way in your hand. It's got to be balanced, so but field lacrosse was different. I preferred the plastic stick, I have to say, in field lacrosse. And the sticks now, I mean, you can see the shots women can do. I mean, they can do sidearm sub shots with that. The way the pocket's configured now is completely different than when we played.
Of course. Now, we talked about your induction in the Canadian Hall of Fame, and I want to get into that in a minute or two. But the really cool thing, I think, is you got inducted into the Port Coquitlam Hall of Fame, into your hometown. Talk about that as an honor, because I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I guess they contacted me months ahead. Well, more than months ahead, to say, hey, you've been nominated for the Port Coquitlam Hall of Fame. And I was literally thunderstruck. And because I don't know, you leave your hometown, you go on to your playing career, you don't really think much about it, that anybody's paying attention to what you did. And so I got a call to say I was shortlisted, and I said, oh, okay. And the guy says to me, well, we'll let you know. And he contacted me a short while later, and he said, well, I'm here to tell you, you're getting inducted into the POCO Lacrosse Hall of Fame. And I mean, it's not getting into the Canadian Lacrosse Hall of Fame is huge, but something about going in my hometown. And I know a lot of the people that were inducted ahead of me, and people that I knew from high school and stuff. And it's just such a great honor to be considered, in the same conversation. So it's a pretty special thing for sure.
Now, I watched that ceremony, and I have to admit, I was taken aback how unique it was when they had the girls of today discuss your career, and then having you enhance what they said with stories. I thought that was just an absolute marvel of an idea as a way to induct you.
Yeah, it was fun to participate in that, and just yeah, the gals, they all had their own questions that they wanted to ask me, and it wasn't. I don't even think it was until then, Gary, that it really started to sink in that
Right.
I'm part of the history of the game, and that these girls were actually intrigued by some of the stories going back in time, and yeah, I mean, if I think of all the experiences I've had along those lines, I mean, that was right up there, having those conversations with those young gals.
Now let's get into the Canadian Hall of Fame induction, and that's the biggie. Let's talk about that honor and what that meant to you.
Well, there's only two other women that have gone in ahead of me as players, and
Mm-hmm.
that's Carrie Hartle and Gail Cummings Danson, and I was teammates with both of them. Both tremendous players. Um, on the one hand, Gary, like again, it's a huge honor to be recognized, and for one's sports career. But on the other hand, like for me, I just did I did a speech for a group of BC Selects lacrosse players, field lacrosse players recently, and I talked about the fact that there's 3 women in the Canadian Hall now, and there's over 300 male lacrosse players in. I said, like, that has got to change.
Yeah, I agree.
So yeah, I'm happy to just sort of use that platform to push sort of that agenda forward, that we have so many amazing women lacrosse athletes out there, both box and field, and that we need to start getting more of those women in the hall, because there's a lot of deserving people. So it's not just me, Gary. I can think of a ton of people that should be there right beside me.
Well, you and a lot of your teammates, excuse me, are trailblazers, absolute groundbreakers for where we are today. Like, you're very humble the way you're talking with us, but you know, the idea that playing something you love and seeing where it is now, that must just be immense.
Yeah, actually, just doing that speech at that banquet recently, it really did like kind of kick in. I'm looking at all the future stars of the game, and somebody put a sheet of paper on I was sitting at the head table, and it was a list of all the gals that have gone from BC on scholarships down to the States now.
Mm-hmm.
And like literally, Gail Cummings Danson was the first one that went off on a scholarship down to the States. And since that time, I mean, there were hundreds of girls' names on that sheet of paper, and I thought, wow, like this is, I know where it started, and it's only going to keep going. And I just wish actually that all these players could stay here in Canada and get those scholarships, because then that would be really cool.
But the reality is the U.S. colleges have the money to, getting sports going in colleges and universities requires money.
Yeah.
That's the reality of it, I guess.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. But what an opportunity for these gals to, to be able to go off, and a lot of them, stayed on in the States. Like Gail Cummings stayed on and is now, I believe, an athletic director at a major university. Dana Dobie, who's on the working group with me, she's down at Loyola coaching right now. There's so many of them that's they end up staying, marrying American fellows, and making it a full career. So yeah, it's a tremendous opportunity for lacrosse athletes, for sure.
How else do you see it growing? If there was one step that you'd like to see that would give evidence, like you've given evidence of the progress by virtue of how many girls are making it down to U.S. colleges, what other ways do you see that would be a hint that things are moving in the right direction? The next step you see in the future?
I would love to see the game. Well, the box game for starters. My first love. I mean, that's why I'm chair of the Women's Box Lacrosse Working Group. World Lacrosse recognized that there was a real lack of equity on that side of things. We've got men's and women's field, we've got the U19 men's and women's, and then there was men's box that's had 5 world championships, and the women haven't had one. So, that was our our vision with the working group was to get the women's box game on the world stage. So um, sure enough, the General Assembly met last, I believe it was December. We had submitted a 40-page plus or minus report to World Lacrosse, outlining what we felt was the pathway forward for the box game for women, and they agreed with us that women should have that opportunity the same as the men. And so there will be a world championship in box lacrosse for women in 2024. It will be run alongside the men's next world tournament as well. So that's a huge step forward. It took us a year. World Lacrosse was surprised that we were able to convince them of that. I don't know. The General Assembly agreed that women should have that opportunity, but it was the voices of the women in that survey that told us that women really want that opportunity.
Sure.
And to us, it's really important because, we think, well, and then we're the example of taking a group of box players. We applied those box skills to field, and we had tremendous results. And we think it's the same for sixes. In fact, the carryover is probably even more natural from box to sixes.
Mm-hmm.
So we just think girls having the opportunity to play box just makes them better lacrosse players in general. So that would, I think, if we could see the women's game growing on that side, that would be a real sign that we've finally broken through the
right
glass ceiling kind of thing.
Yeah, the good news is that we live in a world today where information moves freely, experiences are shared right away. And what you're talking about when you say, improving box lacrosse, I know you're not saying about leaving field lacrosse behind, but any victory that the women can have in box lacrosse can be shared and used by the women in field lacrosse. The same is true from sports outside of lacrosse. The women's national soccer team in the US just won an award, right, from a judge saying they deserve to be paid as much as the men. It's these kinds of victories for women that help you in what you're trying to do as well. So it's not just an issue of lacrosse, it's an issue of women in sport and as a group lifting each other up.
Yeah, gender equity, that's at the root of all this, and just to ensure that whatever the sport is, that girls and women have the same opportunities as boys and men to compete at the highest level. And that's the thing. I mean, it's all well and fine. You have minor leagues and everything, or fun lacrosse or whatever. But we heard in that survey with World Lacrosse that women want that opportunity to play for their country and just play more lacrosse. So whether it's box, field, sixes, whatever it is, if you ask a lot of women lacrosse athletes, they'd say, "Oh, I want to play all three, and I want to play at the highest level. I want to have the opportunity at very least."
Right. Now, the Arena Lacrosse League here in Ontario has been around for for a few years, and it's worked with a lot of men going towards the NLL, but also they've had a women's program. Now that it's started up in BC, I know in Langley they have the men's one going. I think that they're trying to get the women's one going, but I'm not too sure how that's working.
Well, that worked out very well, in fact, Gary. So the president, the owner, flew out here last October, and he wanted to meet with myself and a few other gals from the women's league to see if there was any appetite for an ALL West division for women. And I guess the long story short is we put together a letter of intent and sent it out everywhere and in BC. And within short order, I had these letters of intent flying back into my email box. And I kept saying to Paul St. John, I said, he had sort of a magic number in mind, which I think was 60, 4 teams, 15. And when we were getting close to 60, I said, Paul, I think we're going to make it. And he actually didn't think we would start the league until like this year. I think we're up over 100 women that are signed. We ended up having a 4-team league. It ran 5 weeks, so it was, a little bit briefer than the men's side, but there was a huge outpouring of excitement, and especially for a lot of players, Gary, that kind of, they call it aging out of the game. So they come back from playing college field, or they play to a certain level like midget.
Yeah.
and there's not much after that. So the ALL was like a breath of fresh air for a lot of these girls. But there were women there from age 16 to practically 60. Like they just
Wow.
wanted to play
That's
lacrosse. And
amazing.
so it was a huge success. And I think next year we'll probably see an addition of at least one, if not two more teams, maybe more.
That's spectacular. Now, we had Amber Hill on a few weeks back, and she was talking about she's in a professional league with Athletes Unlimited, and that's brand new also.
Yeah.
And so, getting paid to do what you love as well, which is spectacular. Let's talk a little bit about Amber and her drive. To me, she came across as an absolute strong woman that was such a strong resolve, who's going to work for everything and get where she's going to be. And I think that she's mostly the poster child of women's lacrosse and how to get to where you need to be.
Oh, she is literally, we want to talk about a lot of balls in the air. Amber's doing everything in her power, I think, to single-handedly, push the women's game forward, whether it's field, box, or sixes. So she's doing, coaching at college level. She's played the pro last summer. Her own daughter. Half the time when we have Zoom meetings, Amber's, hosting the Zoom meeting while she's driving her daughter off to a game somewhere. Or, she's just a dynamo. And what I love about her, Gary, is, I'll reach out and say, "Hey, Amber, can you do this? Can you do that?" And she's like, "You got it, MB." And so she's just such an asset overall to just the women's game. And if she could just single-handedly, get women's lacrosse splashed out there all over the world, she'd probably be the one that could do it.
Right. I agree. Now, a State of the Union, where do you see women's lacrosse down the road, say 5-10 years from now?
Well, I think with social, the word gets spread out so much easier now. And there's a lot of allies that we have on the women's side that are, stakeholders. Private operators are really pushing the women's side of the game. So, I think of a guy locally, Kevin Crowley with Fusion West. I mean, he said to me one time, "Whatever I do for the boys' side, I'm doing for the girls' side as well." So huge believer in gender equity and diversity in everything he does.
Mm-hmm.
Jaden Santos with US Boxes, same thing. I mean, these guys are great. Like they're really, they're integral to the growth of the women's game. And we do need these allies in the women's game to push it forward. And I think that's with any sports out there where women are just trying to get a leg up and push through glass ceilings. We do need our allies. And, some of those guys out there they're just doing a tremendous job. And then on our working group over in Europe, we've got Brian Widmer and Francisek Klima, who's with the European Lacrosse Federation. Again, just great guys that have come on board and are really helping our cause.
And I'm assuming funding and sponsorships are a lot easier than when you were trying to get this across.
Funding? What funding?
Well,
yeah.
Chocolate bars.
What's that?
Chocolate bars.
Cheese, chocolate bars, more car washes.
Car wash.
Yeah.
No, seriously though, it's imperative that, the good news is that, we'd love to see the sport run by women, right? Participants and run by women as well. For a time, because of the them surviving beside each other, and what you pointed out just a moment ago, that it's important that these men who happen to be running men's leagues are going, "Oh, we should do the same thing for women." The female infrastructure, how soon do you think we can start to see, and are we close to having women be able to run these things on their own and basically be full-throated women's sport?
Yeah, I do believe that, I think Ontario is probably a really good example of that. Being in a place that's probably far ahead of us here, where a lot of the women are coaching, they're involved in administration, they're higher up in the organizations, certainly with lacrosse. And I think that's really important. There's something that happened just late last year. Lacrosse Canada has struck a gender equity committee and I'm on the gender equity committee with just a great group of women from across Canada. So, having something like that to ensure that each and every member association, so whether it's the BCLA or the OLA, that they have a gender equity game plan in place. Because, I mean, I talked to the president of the BCLA here about a gender equity plan, and I mean, he basically said, they don't even know where to start, and there's a lot of, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Canadian Women in Sport has a gender equity playbook. There's other organizations that are already there, so I think we can accomplish this if we, collectively, we realize how important it is that women have those same opportunities, girls and women, to be involved in sport, but not just as players, but at every level of the game. That's critical, and a lot of it has to do with mentorship, and we do need women to have opportunities to be mentored, so that they can learn those roles and then take on those roles themselves.
Let's be clear. In a lot of sports organizations, when you take professional out of the mix, a lot of them are run by women. When you go through junior franchise, it's not
Yeah.
like it's going to be new territory, right? It just so happens in the pro side, the men's sports are run by men, but a lot of the minor hockey league teams, minor soccer teams, they have presidents who are women, managers who are women. So it's not like it's a brand new, art that needs to be discovered by women, right?
No, absolutely not. You're right. There's a lot of moms out there that are, giving up their time to coach, officiate, whatever, and we actually need some of those women to mentor other women. In the report to World Lacrosse, we talked about something called an ambassador program, and we're trying to push that in national governing bodies all over the world in this sport, that they identify ambassadors in the game, and women that can promote the sport, but also mentor other women. And hopefully that ambassador program is going to catch on with some of these national governing bodies, and we can grow the game on a bunch of different levels and get more women, more women in the game, basically.
An opportunity to be present and get on the job training.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd actually like that. My heart of hearts, and I've already dropped it with Kevin Crowley recently, is I'd like to do something in the NL, like what they're doing in the NFL, where I can't think of the gal's name right off the top of my head, but she is working for the NFL, and she's got a program where
Oh,
they're,
she's Canadian, by the way.
and she is Canadian. I can't remember her name, but
Her name. I just looked at her name the other day. We did a CFL show, and I did some research, and I found her because the NFL is full. I don't
yeah,
want to sidetrack. They're full of women involved in upper management in the NFL. It's nothing. In fact, even the Canadian Football League, which I have another show, same thing, right? So women are everywhere. It's just a question of. I think it goes back to what you were saying. It's not just mentorship. It's about lifting other women. And you're right, if you bring that example in here, because a lot of times the reason women don't get hired, and the way people, even people of color, the reason they don't get hired is because they say, what experience do you have? Well, how can I get the
yeah,
job if I have no experience and you won't give me any?
yeah. Yeah, that gal. We'll remember her name when
Should
we're
look
done.
it up.
I feel bad. I was hoping I could remember her name, but anyway, she's just done a brilliant job, and I would love to see a similar thing in the NLL where we get more women, working on that professional side while we're developing the LL, which will be hopefully the conduit to women getting into professional lacrosse. And Paul St. John did say that when he was out here, that that's actually his vision, is to get women playing the pro game, and the LL would be the stepping stone to that.
I think so too. Yes. I want to thank you so much for taking the time with us. It's been spectacular. You're such a groundbreaker, so humble, but doing so much, and it's wonderful. And I wish you all the success in the world.
Thanks, Gary. I really appreciate you having me on, and I really enjoyed the conversation, and great to meet you guys.
The pleasure's all ours, and I'd like to personally thank you as well. And I wish you best of luck in continuing, your view of women's sport, which is basically uh, equal.
Absolutely.
Not just equity, but equal to the way the boys play. I'm dying to see somebody say that in ice hockey, because I really think it'd make a difference in the attraction of the game. I think women can handle it. That's just my opinion.
I agree.
I'm 100% in agreement with that.
Thank you. It was a real pleasure, Michelle, working with you here.
Thank you. We'll talk to you again soon, hopefully.
Yes.
Always. There's always a seat there for you if you have some news for us you'd like to share.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, Gary, thanks a lot, buddy.
Thank you very much, Frank. It's always a pleasure to talk lacrosse.
Absolutely. For Gary Groob, Michelle Bowyer, I'm Candid Frank Stanisci. Thank you for watching NLL Lacrosse Talk, seen live Thursdays at 4 p.m. This show can also be heard on the Spanglish World Radio Network. For Lacrosse Talk, news, entertainment, and other sports programming we offer, please check out spanglishworld.ca. Spanglish World. Watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it. Thanks for watching, everybody.